Hey, this is Robert Monroe. I know it's been just a little bit, but life has happened. I got a new little person here, and I'm up here right now because I'm trying to watch him while I work. So, we're going to do videos slightly different with a different setup, but that's totally fine because today we're going to talk about nobody teaches this. And what we're talking about is nobody teaching how to read emails for gigs. If you are like me, you got a lot of lessons on how to play piano. You may even got lessons on how to play piano for gigs. You got musical ideas, things to do, but nobody taught you basic business skills of how to read an email and get the gig and also know how to respond and what details are important in such and such. So we're just going to go through kind of blow by blow and get that set up. The first thing is going to be kind of a techie thing. I'm going to only spend a second on this because this is more about the music side of things and less about the techie side. But on the techie side, make sure your email account is pretty clean. Make sure you got some spam filter on there. Make sure you have some way of sorting emails out so you know when a new email comes in so you can respond immediately. That's the first thing I want to tell you. If you are saying yes or no to a gig, you need to respond immediately. If you are talking about the attire, if you're talking about little details, immediate response. That is what the musician requires. It is insane, but that is the world we live in. I have lost gigs because I have not responded within the first 5 minutes. So that's the first detail. But let's start going through a list of things that are important to pay attention as you read the email. Who it's from, who your contact person is, what the band setup is, what music generally is being played. We'll get into specifics later. What the attire is, what the logistics of start time, end time is, what the different logistics of getting in and out the venue, load in, parking, and then are you being fed there? Do they have a policy where you cannot drink or partake of any of the food for guests? Things of that nature. Now, let's kind of go back and forth through this list and kind of unpack it a little bit. So let's start at the end. When we talk about food, this is a pretty touchy subject for musicians. Musicians are generally treated somewhat poorly at times, and so we kind of get a bad attitude, and then we end up doing things that would be unprofessional in other environments, but sometimes we're allowed to get away with them, like drink and eat what the guests are given. There's nothing wrong with that if that's okay. If it's not okay in the event, that should be communicated. So you just need to check all these details. And the best way to do this is when in doubt, practice caution. And then if you know, then do your thing. Let's go back a little bit. Oh, and on the food, if you need something, just bring it yourself. That's an easy way to resolve it. Then let's back up another one. Let's talk about parking. This one, again, use your common sense. If you're parking in a downtown area, the event is in downtown Chicago, you're gonna need a framework of how to park and where to park. Otherwise, you're gonna be out 30, $40. And if you're just starting out in your career, the gig might only pay $150. And now you literally lost a third of your pay because you didn't know where to park. And so you parked somewhere else and they didn't reimburse you. Make sure you know where parking is and if parking is included. And if parking isn't included, maybe that's a good enough reason to actually not take the gig if it's a downtown gig. Then we get into things that are less kind of on the side, more important. And that's like start time and end time. Now, there's call time and then there's start time. Two very important distinctions. Start time is important because that tells you when you're actually going to start working. So let's imagine that you're on the way to the gig and you get a flat and you are freaking out. Now, if start time is like 2 hours later than call time's at 3, start time's at 5, then you can actually hold your composure together, especially if you know that you know your stuff and you know what you're doing and can set up within 15 minutes. Then the tone of the conversation, you call and you go, hey, I'm going to miss call at 3, but I'm going to be there by 4 and be ready and set up to go by 5. This is why you need to know both start time and call time. If you get just a start time and no call time, it is up to your discretion of when to show up. In general, you want to bundle in probably an extra 30 minutes at least on top of your setup time. If it takes you 30 minutes to set up, bundle an extra 30 minutes in just for buffer and for comfort of the band leader, and so you would end up being there an hour early. In time. Why is in time important? Well, for two reasons. One is you're going to get bent out of shape pretty quick and start to hate the gigs you're doing if you don't know when the in time is, because then you're just going to kind of be sitting there going like, when is this gig ever going to end? The second is for overtime. If you don't know when the actual end time of the gig is, then you don't know when to advocate for, hey, we should be doing more so we can get overtime pay, or hey, we're done. Like, don't play unless they say they're going to pay us more money. Then we back up yet again and we talk about attire and other sort of logistics in that nature, costuming, logistics of where you need to be, stuff like that. That stuff you need to make sure, okay, is it unusual? Well, if it's an unusual request, then they need to provide it. If it's a usual request like a suit or something, you're probably going to have to be required to hold on to something and have that on your person, and that's perfectly fine. That's a normal thing. Black suit, that pretty much everyone thinks that you're going to have a black suit. A dress-up shirt, everyone thinks that you're probably going to have that. So you're probably going to have to provide that. Again, be reasonable. And I know common sense is kind of a hard standard to hold to, but that's really the standard that you need to be thinking of. Then we back up yet again and we talk about equipment. Now, depending on which instrument you play, this is somewhat either sort of set in stone or not. Like if you're a trumpet player, you should not expect the venue or the band to provide your trumpet. That would be insane. But to provide a trumpet microphone, that's pretty normal. As a keyboardist, I generally expect that I'm going to have to bring my keyboards unless they say otherwise. Now, in modern times, I do a lot of laptop setups, so I need to communicate whether they have a MIDI controller or not. Things like that. You know what you need, but you need to think about that equipment request and idea so that you go in eyes wide open and everyone's on the same page. Multiple equipment setups is another big one. Are we going to have multiple locations going and I need different equipment set up for different things? Then we get in to the bread and butter, the thing that you probably actually care about that we can talk a little bit more in depth about, and that is music. How do you prep for the music list and the set list that is involved? And this is what I would recommend. First of all, start off with the most important songs. If you're playing a wedding, it's the dance songs, or it's the entrance songs, or it's cake cutting. That's it. So you need to nail those songs. Sometimes they also have an end of night song. That one also would be a good one to go over. Make sure you know those songs front to back. Even if you have an auxiliary part, it's mostly an acoustic guitar song, got a couple piano notes, make sure you know the piano notes if it's one of those important songs. That's where you start. Start number one. A lot of times if I've got like a few days, a lot of times I'll get a set list maybe like a Wednesday before a Saturday gig. Then what you do is you run through those songs first day you get it, make sure you know them really well. Then the next day or the next practice period you have, you go over the whole list and you make sure that you know which songs are instrument heavy for you. So in my case, as a piano player, that's like Don't Stop Believing. That's like Oh What a Night, boom, 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 boom. Stuff like that. All of those songs I need to make sure that I have really down so that I can be ready the moment that they get called to boom, play them. Then after that, I can go to the songs that are less important to me, but still have important piano parts. So that might be something like, Don't You Dare Look Back, Shut Up and Dance. I don't remember the names of any of these songs. I have to sing a little bit of them. That song has a big important synth solo, but the song itself is actually mostly a guitar song. That's what you want to cover third. And then finally, you want to come back and you want to make sure, if it's your responsibility, to check all the sounds that you have for the gig. So that's kind of the tier that I'd say. Important songs first, then parts on other things, then parts on things that you're less important on, then sounds. Take a lot of notes. No one is going to fault you from having at least a set list. Now, depends on the band. Some bands, iPad okay right in front of your face, sheet music on a stand okay, iPad discreetly okay, phone on the floor okay. But I don't think I've ever run into a band that does not mind a set list on the floor. No band is going to be like, oh, you have a piece of paper on the floor? How dare you? No, 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 no. Everybody's going to be okay with that. So at least take some notes. What key things are in, that's super important. And if none of this is clear, that's when you need to write back. So to summarize up, what you're really looking for is all these super important details. And I would say, in order of importance, these are the most important details: where the gig is, what time the gig starts officially, not call time necessarily, but what time the gig actually starts, and then what songs do you have to play really well. The first dance song, the most important piano song. Those three things, if I know those three things, everything else is kind of meh. With the exception, of course, like right after that, you've got like attire, you've got call time, you've got parking. These things are super important, but they're not as important as those first three. So it kind of goes down the list. Make sure I know all those things. And if I don't know those things, I reach out, I contact whoever I'm supposed to contact and sort it out. I hope this has been helpful. This is kind of a different type of video, but I thought it was really important to talk about this because, again, nobody teaches this stuff. So if you got any comments, throw them below. You got any horror stories you want to tell me about, throw them below. And until next time, have a great day. Peace.